Hi, everybody. Ruth here, and with Gil and Gil Pentzak. Gil is in Israel right now. I'm here in England, and as many of you know, we are working together a lot, and just really enjoying this journey that God has us on. And I really, in our conversations in recent days and weeks, often we've talked about the situation that we find ourselves in right now worldwide. Just the direction it's going, what's happening, how we are seeing this, and I would really wanted to share with everybody what some of our conversations have been around, what we've been talking about, and so I thought we'd just take a few moments, and I want to ask Gil basically to share. Gil, can you share with us? For instance, in our Christian world, we're really seeing there are a lot of people saying a lot of things. There's a lot of what we would call prophetic words that have been from before this all happened, and definitely words now. What is it? Where's it coming from? What's God saying? All of this, and I think it would be really wonderful if you could share what is being said in the Jewish world, in the religious world, the Orthodox world that you come from, and have there been were things said before it happened? For instance, let's maybe start there. Did anyone see this coming?
Not well. Not that I had the chance to actually hear about it. So retroactively, you do hear about somebody that said 2 months ago somebody posts, I don't know, like some sort of a letter or anything that somebody wrote about something which was which is about to come, okay, like a plague or anything or something like that. I think in general, before we even start the conversation, may we make this presupposition that we can't really know all the way through what God's plans are. We can't know it. I mean, we might have a sense, we might have a feeling, we might want to hear something that He has to say, but in the very end, all the way through, I mean, 100% knowledge about God's plan, that's not something that we have the permission to have. Can we, I mean, do we agree on that one?
Yes, I think so.
I mean, because once we have that sort of knowledge, once we say, I understand God's plan completely, that puts us on the same spot as He, like in His place.
Right.
And that can't be. I mean, He's always higher than where we are, always. Okay, He is infinite. We are finite. I mean, He's we don't need to explain that. So we can't really enter into that place of totally understanding what God has to say. It doesn't mean that we don't have the responsibility and an obligation to try to hear what He has to say. Okay, like to do this soul search, as we might say, and take the time to really. I know that in Christian language you might say meditate about it, right? I mean, really trying to hear what He has to say about the current situation. But knowing it all the way through, every time I hear, if in the Jewish world as well, when I hear a rabbi or a leader or somebody standing up saying, all that we see at the moment is because of 1, 2, 3, and what we need to do is 1, 2, 3. And it's all very systematic. It's like in a formula. I understand that this is not the way that this is not the way to follow. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, we always have to be humble before Him.
So is there a sort of stream of thought that this is something that God has sent? Is this something that God is allowing, or is it both?
Well, it is definitely coming from the hand of God. I mean, it's God's hand doing it, for sure. Okay, it's Him. I mean, He is responsible for anything that happens in this world. I mean, the world is his palace, it's his kingdom. We are his servants. Anything happening in our lives, whether we like it, whether we don't like it, I mean, it's all from him. And everything has one purpose. And that purpose is to wake us up. To wake us up, to recognize him, to acknowledge him more and more, to coronate him, to spread the word about his kingdom, to help every living creature worship our Father in heaven. That's the ultimate, purpose for everything that is happening. Now, God has his servants, his serving angels. So if God wants to now give a lot of wealth and goodness and health and all these wonderful things, he would use specific angels who serve these kinds of purposes. And on the contrary, and if we have this world epidemic that goes on and people need to wake up through this this event taking place, there are other angels serving that kind of purpose. But it's always him at the top of the ladder. Do you remember Jacob's dream?
Yes.
Right, in Genesis, in Jacob's dreams, Jacob was he was seeing angels ascending and descending the ladder, but God was standing on the ladder. He was, and the word is really, he was supervising the ladder. Okay, he's at the top of the ladder, supervising, looking at it, supervising this shifts of angels changing.
Some coming, some going.
Yeah, exactly. So he was supervising that. So God has his serving angels, and even the word angel in Hebrew is malach, which is associated with the word melacha. Melacha is a work that needs to be done. So the angels are serving those kinds of purposes. So sometimes we would hear maybe people praying. Also on our side, people would pray for, like, against something like they would say, oh, God, defeat Satan, or they would say take over Satan, or something like that, which is not really the appropriate way of looking at it, because God doesn't need to defeat Satan. I mean, Satan is that small next to God. I mean, he's already defeated. Yeah. Satan serves. He's one of the serving angels. Okay, not such a nice one. I mean, and the purposes and the purposes that he serves and the things that he is in charge of bringing and doing in the world, they're not so pleasant for us. But again, he won't be able to act unless God allows him to act. Otherwise, if we say otherwise, it means that God and Satan are at the same place. I mean, they're at the same authority level, and that for sure can't be. God is the King of all kings. No one can compete with his sovereignty. So we need to be very accurate in the way that we pray about these kinds of things.
How do you deal with the whole thing of, some might look at the whole thing and say, well, if this is God's hand, I don't really want anything to do with God because it's just so cruel. People are dying. How do we deal with that?
Well, and this question goes not only with this COVID-19 situation we are dealing with, but it goes with everything that happens in this world. I mean, anything negative, anything that we suffer from. If we read scriptures, even as people who are believers, Jewish believers, Christian believers, it doesn't matter. Believers in God. Mm-hmm. I mean, people who believe in God and read scriptures, we also face this kind of question, because there are a lot of verses taking place in various places in scriptures, and they depict a very brutal picture sometimes. If you don't if you don't walk in my statutes, if you don't listen to my word, if you don't keep it, then all of these terrible things will come upon you. And then you come up with these questions. If this is the kind of God I worship, maybe I don't want to worship him. What room is there left for free choice if that's the picture being depicted? I mean, if this is the covenant that I'm forced to go into. But we have to remember always that God, that our relationship with God is like is like children with their father. And as parents, we know that sometimes we have to be strict with our children for their benefit. We have to deny sometimes. We have to deny good things that they perceive as good at certain points, because if they get it, it would harm them. Okay, my children love sugar. Okay, they love sweets. Okay, but I can't. I can, just because I love them doesn't mean I can allow them to have this amount of sugar all the time. It would damage them. So I would have to limit it. And sometimes, if they're not taking the right responsibility, and if they go on a path which in the end of the path would put them in a dangerous point, I would have to restrict them and and give them some rules and guidelines. Sometimes I would have to shock them in a certain way, and they would kind of go, why are you against me? You're my father. You're supposed to take care of me. But because I take care of you, I'm putting these restrictions. So everything we are seeing is only for us to wake up as humanity, not just saying this is a Jewish person. The whole world. We have to wake up and recognize our Father in heaven, our Creator. If we want to bring redemption to the world, like for the world to really be redeemed, we have to take that path. We have to be brave enough and say, we accept your sovereignty, and stop worship. We have all these gods that we worship in our time. We worship time, we worship money, we worship social status. How are we seen towards outside? All kinds of gods that we have in our time. We have to let go of these things as much as possible, and bring him into those places.
Just one other thing I'd really love to touch on. One of the things that has been talked about, which I'm really thrilled, because it's been, I think, focusing many hearts on God's calendar, on the Jewish calendar, and there's been a big amount of attention really on the fact that all of this began just before Passover and continued through, and people were talking about, when we get to Passover, something's going to happen. We're going to see a real coming through, and then there's continuing to be a lot of talk right now as we move towards Shavuot, Feast of Weeks, or Pentecost, and that there is going to be another shift now. So, is there talk of this also in your world?
For sure. I mean, we take the calendar very seriously. I mean, each festival, each holiday has a specific spiritual seed which was planted back in the day, and it continues to grow every time we get to that point. So, for example, this whole COVID-19 issue began, at least in Israel, it really broke out. It really broke out in the time of Purim, 1 month before Passover. Okay, the holiday of Purim, the whole story about the book of Esther, right? I mean, the persecution by Haman and everything. It really started then. 1 month later, we had Passover, which has the spiritual seed of redemption. Okay, this is really about God's hand delivering, salvation for us. And then we had 30 days later, we had a day called Lag BaOmer, which was just last week. And on Lag BaOmer was a day in which 2,000 years ago there was a very big plague, and 24,000 rabbis died in that plague. They were the followers of a very famous big rabbi called Rabbi Akiva. And Lag BaOmer, the day which took place last week, that was the day in which 2,000 years ago that plague stopped. So our eyes were always towards Lag BaOmer, because it really says in Jewish sources, this is the day when the plague stopped. And we actually looked up to that day, and the truth is that it actually, everything started to get back to normal here in Israel, in any case, was right after Lag BaOmer. So Lag BaOmer was the last day in which everything was shut, educational system, etc., etc. And then right after Lag BaOmer, everything began to open up, because the numbers really shifted. I mean, the numbers, death cases stopped, and no new ill people. less people connected to breathing machines, etc. So we do see this. We do see this happening. As far as for Passover, because that was your question specifically, the Passover that they celebrated in Egypt many years ago, about 3,500 years ago, the Passover that they celebrated then was a very nuclear Passover. I mean, it wasn't a corporate thing like they used to do in every other generation with mass congregations, everybody coming to the tabernacle, later to the temple, bringing the sacrifice, celebrating it as a nation. In the original Passover, they were committed to go into their homes and to be shut in their homes. They had to make the sacrifice and enjoy the sacrifice, eat the sacrifice in their homes, each man with his own household, not anybody else being joined into it. Okay, and that's exactly the same kind of celebration that we had to have this year. We were all in our homes. We weren't able to invite anybody to come, not family, not friends, which is very, very unusual. But yet when you have this picture about the original time when God delivered that salvation to our nation, and now He's pushing us into our homes, literally with His hands, pushing us into our homes. He shuts the door of the house. That to itself has a lot of meaning. And when you think about Passover and what it means, God passing over our homes, and while there is a big plague that goes on in Egypt 3,500 years ago, and He passed over the homes where the blood was, on the doorposts and everything, and you take that as a symbol of your family celebrating exactly that while there is an epidemic going on out there, and God passing over your homes and keeping you, that has a lot of meaning. So we can find a lot of symbolism and meaning in the time in which we are living to what we are experiencing actually. And so I would just like to add one more thing about this, and the whole question about synagogues, because synagogues were closed during the whole time, right? I mean, they are going to open this weekend. Okay? It's Wednesday today. This weekend it's going to open. And there's a lot. There is a big issue of soul search in regarding to synagogues and what is the symbolism behind it, behind them being closed, because we've never seen that Torah scrolls staying inside of the ark. They're not being taken out. Nobody's allowed to touch the Torah scroll usually we would kiss it, we would honor it. It's a big thing every week to take it out of the ark and read from it. And that didn't happen for about 2 months, which is all over the world, no Torah scroll was taken out and was read from. It's a painful thing.
We should talk about
the soul search. And each can take it on a very individual level. But I was reading just last night. I was reading a letter from an Israeli rabbi, and he was just posting questions. He was just saying, if we look back in the day about the times when synagogues were closed and when temples were destroyed, what was the reason for that? The reason was our us defiling it, not honoring the substance inside, the meaning inside. Nowadays, how many of us, walk into a prayer house, synagogue, or a church, or whatever that is? How many of us do it holding our smartphones in hand? And sometimes, we would kind of look, just peek, if something new took place, or how many of us would speak words which are not connected to prayer and worship inside of a prayer house. How many of us do that? I mean, do we really honor? Do we really have this kind of respect towards the place where we come together and worship our Father in heaven? He was posting those questions. Of course, his answer is clear, and he said, now that they are about to reopen, let's just take this in. Let's take this in and try to learn something from it, so that we don't have it again.
And how was it being shut away in your homes for Shabbat, for each Shabbat, your family?
it's interesting because it's. Are you saying like in terms of the family or like in
Yes,
terms of the services which usually take place?
I think in terms of the family. How did it affect your children?
It was a wonderful thing. It was a wonderful season, I must say. I mean, I know that. I mean, despite the challenges, despite the noise, despite the house is always active. Like there was no break really. The
Mm-hmm.
children started to go to school just yesterday on Tuesday, and we found ourselves 8 o'clock in the morning and no one is at the house. I mean, everybody is out, and something which didn't happen for 2.5 months.
Yeah, when you have six
So
children, I guess you really feel that.
yeah. I mean, you feel that. I mean, it's very meaningful. It was so quiet, but this season I think was very very inspiring. It was a gift, despite the difficulties. It was a gift, and it still is. It still is. I mean, as long as we have something to learn from it, it's a gift from God to, to cleave. You would say, like to
To him.
hold on to Him, to hold on
Yeah.
to Him. More and more. So it was very busy during the time when we were home, and we did homeschooling. It was like top of the nest in a sense. So yeah, so just like getting used to this new reality now.
Mm. Okay, well, I think we'll give it a break there, and it's been fantastic just to share and to hear from you, Gil. Thank you so much.
Thank you for
Bye.
the opportunity.